Welcome this evening to the Candidates Forum. Without further ado, we will go ahead and say hello to everybody and have our candidates get started with a very brief introduction of about 3 minutes each, after which we will go ahead and have them talk about a few general hot topics in the community this evening, and then we will go ahead and take questions from the forum. Thank you very much, and I'll go ahead and start with you, John, and we'll go to the right.
Thank you. Mine won't take 3 minutes, I don't think. My name is John Tansey. I'm running for the Vermont House of Representatives for Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor. I've lived most of my life, and I know in these towns, and I know them very well. Our communities are facing important decisions, and the choices we make in the next few years will be with us for a long time. I want every person in our district to know that by electing me, they will have someone in Montpelier who is accessible, listens, and works hard for them every day. I am a Windsor resident who served as a Peace Corps volunteer and then earned degrees from Cornell University and Dartmouth College. Most of my career has been spent managing educational programs around the world, most of that for Dartmouth. The people I've been speaking with care deeply about this area, but have real concerns about the cost of living, whether they and our youth can find jobs, housing, and afford to stay, and whether we can grow responsibly and sustainably. They're also troubled by the loss of basic respect in public life. These are exactly the issues my campaign is focused on, and I am committed to working on them with honesty and decency. I have a strong record of service, having led nonprofit boards in healthcare, education, local government, and in economic development, which has helped me understand how challenges in one area are often connected to others. I am asking for your vote, and I look forward to responding to your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Great. I want to start by saying thanks everyone for being here. Politics are tough these days, and so to have local participation is really important, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your summer evening to be here and to listen to us ramble. I'm Dylan Morse. I live in Heartland. That's where I've grown up, where I went to school, and where I live. I was going to get up here tonight and talk about how I'm the young candidate, but I worked today and dug a long trench and went hiking this weekend, and so I think my knees and back probably feel the same as no offense. No, but I am excited to be a young person in politics, and when I go to people's doors, that's what they notice first, and that's what they're most excited about. I think we need change in our national politics, but it starts here in our district and in our state. We need change, energy, youth, and optimism, and that's what I'm bringing to the table. I want to be upfront with everyone. I'm not going to be able to stand here and tell you about my decades and decades of experience because I just haven't had a chance to get it yet. But the experience I do have covers all levels of government. When I was in high school, my idea of fun was sitting on the school board to represent the student body. And from there, I went on to work in Montpelier at the State House. I went on to work in the U.S. Senate for Peter Welch, and then I worked in local government in elections. And what I've kind of realized through all these levels of government is that it isn't working well enough for everyday people. Working people, our families, are struggling, and government hasn't been responsive enough to their calls for help. So I'm hoping to help usher in a more responsive government that will solve challenges, not just kick the can down the road. That's what I'm hoping to bring to the table, and I hope I can have your vote to do so. I'm not someone who wants to sit on the sidelines. I want to be involved, and my future and my generation's future relies on it. So I'm excited to be active, proactive, and to be a voice for you in Montpelier. So thank you for being here.
I'm John Bartholomew. First of all, I would like to really thank the town and the whole district for supporting me over the years as your state representative. It's been a tremendous honor. I'd also like to acknowledge my former district mate back there, Donna Swaney. It was great working with her. I Since I've been in the legislature, I have served on the Agriculture Committee. I'm currently back on the Agriculture Committee as Vice Chair. I've also served on the Transportation Committee and on the Environment Committee. And I was elected by the caucus to serve on the Rules Committee, which is an important aspect of what we do. You can't play the game if you don't know the rules. So I've had a lot of experience in Montpelier already. Professionally, I was a veterinarian, a retired veterinarian. I was had an Air Force scholarship for veterinary school, and actually I was in 3 different services, and it would take more than 3 minutes to explain why. I also served in the Army and ended up in the Public Health Service as the Institute Veterinarian at National Institute of Child Health and Human Development at National Institutes. I can't do my whole title in one breath. And so that was quite an experience. NIH is probably the most political organization I can think of. So when I retired from the Public Health Service, I moved to Vermont to live a more quiet, peaceful life, and then got this part-time job in the legislature that's been very gratifying. I've been basically in public service my whole career, being in the military, public health service, justice of the peace in Heartland, and a state representative. So it's kind of what I do. And I would really appreciate your vote. Love to go back and continue to represent you. There are going to be some very difficult issues facing us as we move forward. It would take a long time to even list all of them. One of the most important, right off the bat, when we go back, is our Speaker of the House is retiring. So one of the first votes we have to make is to select the new Speaker, which is going to kind of just set the tone for the next couple of years. So that's, I guess what I'm saying here is experience is going to be important as we move forward because there's so many difficult issues facing our state. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, John. And so to start with, just general, a chance for the candidates to respond to some topics which we've seen in the community are certainly of the moment. And number one, affordability. I think everybody here has seen every aspect of cost of living go up recently. And in particular, I'd like the candidates to address the question of property taxes this evening, since I think everybody has seen over the last few years double-digit property tax increases. Where do they see this going? What are the drivers of this? And what do they think should be done over the next couple of years to help bring some stability to property tax growth? And we'll go ahead and start with just John here right to my right, and we'll give everyone about 2 minutes to respond.
Okay, I think the key is we need to have people here in Vermont. We need to have housing and jobs. We need to grow sustainably. We need to look at the regulatory environment to see that we can facilitate the type of growth we need. We have too few people paying into the property tax systems, paying into the healthcare systems, and so forth. But until we achieve that growth, we really have to be disciplined in terms of cost and in the state budget and our educational budgets. And so it's going to be critical as we move forward here, particularly with the federal government pulling back expenses and shifting them onto the states. It's going to be even more challenging. But I don't think, we can't cut our way out of the future. We really do need to find a way to grow and grow responsibility. Key is going to be jobs and housing so people can live, pay into the taxation system, put kids in school, pay into the health insurance pools and so forth. And then we'll see some returns in terms of revenues for the state and the localities. Go ahead, Dylan.
Great. Yeah, the property tax issue is the #1 issue that I hear about when I go to doors. People all across the ideological spectrum are saying it's costing too much to live here. 40% increase over the last 5 years is not sustainable. This year, Montpelier decided to pay $100 million to buy down the property tax rate. So that money is one time, now it's gone. Next year, we'll be right back in the same situation. And we don't know if we'll have those reserve funds up for grabs. So we need to really make systemic changes in how we fund the government here in Vermont. And we need to get into the core of the school issue, because the school issue is the driver of property taxes, and within that, I think it's healthcare. I mean, it's absolutely housing. We need more people. We need more kids in the schools. But the increased cost of healthcare is why school costs are going up, and subsequently property taxes are going up. We need to push our healthcare system off of a fee-for-service model because, one, it's not achieving outcomes for anyone that are desirable. It's rushing doctors through patients. It's bankrupting the insurers in our state, who often get the blame, and it's leaving us feeling like we're not being taken care of when we go see our doctors, and it's costing more and more and more. The incentives that the fee-for-service administration of healthcare create are not in line with our values that we hold as a state, where we take care of each other, and it's bankrupting state by state, and it's why we're digging into these excess funds. So we need a new model of healthcare that can look like a single payer, that can look like universal, but it has to take away that fee-for-service model where every time you go in, you're charged for whatever you get, and you have no decision making really in that process, and insurers are forced to write blank checks. We need a managed care system where your health is put first, and when you're healthy, the system costs less. So I think Montpelier can do more, even though Washington is not a helpful partner, to build housing to attract residents, but on the property tax issue, it's healthcare.
Thank you, Dylan. John?
I couldn't agree more about the healthcare issue being a huge problem, not just for our personal health, but for school budgets and any type of municipal budget where there's healthcare. It's just unsustainable, our system, and it's just unfortunate that we can't come up with an easy way to fix it. I've been a long-time supporter of single payer, and I'm not sure if Vermont can make that work on our own. I would love to see it happen. I think it makes a lot of sense to try to partner with other states to come up with a healthcare system that will work. But it's not just healthcare. Healthcare is one of the biggest drivers in our property tax issue and our school funding issue because it's just so expensive. But there are many other issues. Property taxes, our school funding is way too reliant on property taxes, and our system really doesn't work. The Ways and Means Committee is working with the Department of Taxes, trying to come up with a different way of collecting taxes. One of our big problems right now is that if you are a non-resident homeowner, your taxes may actually be lower. In Heartland, I'm not sure in Windsor, but in Heartland they're actually lower than a resident homeowner, which makes no sense. But it's quite a process to make that switch, so that, because right now commercial and residential and all these different rental type properties are all taxed at the same rate, which makes no sense. We have to split those out, and it's just taking more time than it needs to for that to happen. But we really, really do not have a sustainable property tax system. The taxes just keep going up, and it's reliant on this school funding, and we don't have enough students. You touched on that, how to get more students in the school, how to keep the prices down when inflation, schools have the same, they go to buy supplies for renovations or construction. They've got the same high prices. They've got the same high prices for food, salaries, and we mentioned health care. All these are just going up and up and up, and that's driving our property taxes through the roof, and we've got to come up with a solution. We've been working on it. It's not a really clear, easy path forward, or we would have taken it.
Thank you, John. Beyond the property tax issue is the overall cost of housing in Vermont. To share a grim statistic, in 2019 it cost approximately $280,000 to build 1,000 feet of residential space. Today it's approximately $530,000 to build that same space, and applying what public funding is going to support housing development, the public is spending approximately $240,000 for each of those 1,000 feet of residential space that we're building. What is it we should be doing to make housing more affordable in Vermont, and where is the legislature's role in that? And we'll start at the other end this time. John Bartholomew?
I was afraid you were going to do that.
Yes.
That's obviously a huge problem, and we cannot control the cost of land. We can't control the cost of construction and construction materials. So trying to come up with ways to fund these things is extremely difficult. So, and we've had some bills go through the Housing Committee that actually one of them was looking pretty favorable and got vetoed by the governor. So exactly how to move forward when you've got all these challenges, it's really unclear. There has to be public underwriting to create affordable housing. And another really difficult problem are the Airbnbs, because there's so many rental properties out there that are not, it's much easier for a landlord to rent on a weekend basis and make more money and not have to worry about possibly a problem tenant. So we have to find a way to make it more attractive for people to rent their properties as an apartment for full-time housing rather than part-time rentals. My train of thought went away. Can't think of where I was going with there. There was another tangent and it went away. So I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you. Dylan?
Yeah, I think we just need to build. We have a shortage of supply, and we need to create more supply. There's a lot of demand, and since COVID, there's been even more demand. And build can mean, a new apartment building down here on Main Street in Windsor, or it can mean renovating, older homes that have been around for a long time. But the world has changed a lot since a lot of Vermont homes were built. We have the oldest housing supply in the nation, and they were built for a different age. They were built for, farmhouses with families having 10 kids running around, and the world has changed, and our housing supply should change with it. Young people should be able to find an apartment in our area so they can stay and contribute, or they're going to keep leaving, and they are leaving. Or we should have small homes for couples who don't want kids, or people in the workforce, or if you only want to have 2 kids, you should have a house for that size. We have to have 21st century housing in Vermont to meet our needs for today, and we just don't. And it leaves people in binds, and so they leave. They go to other states where housing is more affordable. And I'm living this reality. I'm on the rental market right now looking for apartments, and it's tough out there. And I know it's better in other places for that availability. But Vermonters love Vermont, and we want to be here. So we should make it a little easier for people to be here. We have a huge legal regulatory thicket that prevents a lot of action from being taken on the housing front, and we need to kind of sift through that so we can update our housing stock, we can build what we need, and we can support the next generation of Vermonters and our older generation who wants to transition out of their big homes. We need to address both, and we need to do it fast.
Thank you. John?
I think that the state has and can continue to play a role in offering advantageous financing to facilitate housing projects. I think there's been some recent regulatory changes that can be beneficial, like having a second unit in a say an downtown area zone for currently zoned for a single home. Can have a duplex there, for instance. So there are changes like that I think are productive. I mean, retrofitting some of these old homes so that they can be, through financial assistance, converted to apartments, which has been happening over time already, so that the owner can continue to stay there, but it's just easier to navigate the process for both financing and on the regulatory side to make those adjustments to the property. There are perhaps other ways too. I know at Dartmouth College they have a stock of housing for faculty and staff, and people come in and buy it, and with the understanding that they then have to sell it back to the college, and the college will make it available to future employees. So there may be state programs, or even private industry funded programs that could do something similar. So with the right incentives, that we retain and build a stock of housing that can be turned over to private ownership rather than bought by corporate or other interests. But we do need to address the housing issue.
Thank you, John.
Can I touch on the point I forgot?
Sure, yeah.
Does that violate the rules? No, and you guys kind of touched on
Yeah,
it.
had a
but
little extra
There are a lot
time,
of
so.
people out there who are in houses, their kids are gone, they're in houses that are much bigger than they need and much bigger than they want. And they have few alternatives that are affordable somewhere else to go, making that house available for family. So that's something else that we really need to address.
Very good. And so in probably the last of the trifecta of everyday living costs, Vermont is a tough state to live in. It's a tough state to get around in. We know transportation is a challenge, and we also know that several months of the year we have to heat our homes. In light of especially what's going on with the international scene and uncertainty about fuel and oil costs, what should the state be doing to help making the monthly and daily costs of living in terms of carbon affordable? And should we be thinking about rethinking some of our carbon strategies in terms of mitigating climate change in the face of these costs? And so we'll start with Dylan this time. We'll go from the middle.
Great. Yeah, I think that the later part of the question is the answer. We need to be moving away from carbon-sourced energy, and today solar is now the cheapest form of energy, but there's a reason that it's not everywhere, and that's because we haven't built the infrastructure that we need to have a green economy yet. I think one of the messages I've been hearing from people around is that we need jobs to keep people first, and jobs and housing are intrinsically linked. And I think, what a great opportunity if we could build our clean energy future here in Vermont, and create good paying union manufacturing jobs here in Vermont, where we can build solar panels, we can build EV chargers so that we can take on the next stage of our energy future. I think the next 10 years in American politics is going to shift a lot towards energy, and if the war in Iran has told us anything, it's that we can't rely on all of these global pinch points for our fuel costs, and we should generate our own energy here, and we can. We just have to take initiative to build the future that we want, and that can start with jobs, it can start with infrastructure. So
Thank you. And John, we'll go with John Bartholomew.
Energy and climate change is one of my passions. It's one of the main reasons that I ran for office in the first place, because it's something that's so critically important, our energy future. And part of this relates back to the housing that we were just talking about, our old housing stock. Many of these houses are drafty. They're not well insulated. They don't have sophisticated mechanical infrastructure, and trying to retrofit those houses is a real challenge. So finding funding, and particularly for people who can't afford to weatherize, has been a priority, and it was critically important. But the other real issue that concerns me is that Vermonters are getting left behind. If you have resources, you can buy an electric car, you can put solar panels in your house, you can weatherize your house, you can buy the high-efficiency heat pump, you can get almost totally off fossil fuels. But there's that hump to get there. You've got that upfront cost that many Vermonters can't get past, and many Vermonters, like I said, are getting left behind. This change in, regardless of what our president may say, there's already a change in what our energy future is going to look like. Everything's being more electrified, and if you aren't paying attention, you're going to be, as I've said, left behind. How to fix that? How to make sure that lower income Vermonters can afford to buy heat pumps, can afford to buy the electric car. That's one thing when I was on the Transportation Committee, we were able to have some incentives to help people get rid of their gas guzzlers and buy much more efficient vehicles, or to put in chargers, or so that was one thing that we were really proud of. And of course, that funding is depending on tax dollars. Where are we going to get the money? So how to make it so that every Vermonter can keep up with the changes that are already upon us, that's going to be our challenge.
Thank you.
And the question was originally focused on transportation.
Well, really about cost of living related to fuel, energy, and oil, and of course the impact of our climate change policies on the daily cost of living.
Well, first of all, I think it's shameful how the U.S. government has pulled back on funding green projects. I mean, cutting off offshore wind projects we've invested billions of dollars, pulling back on making charging stations available, fast charging stations and so forth. This is clearly an area that investment pays off many times over. And so that's shameful, but what can we do as a state? We have to continue to invest. I think, I was thinking in terms of transportation, there are some public-private partnerships that have been working well. Employers in the Upper Valley help fund the mover, the stagecoach, those things, so that commuters can go free of charge, these advanced transit. We need to have more opportunities for those and kind of better schedules, because I've commuted to the Upper Valley and those would go once or twice a day but not have a regular schedule. I think we need to continue to invest in organizations like Efficiency of Vermont to help Vermonters weatherize their homes, improve their heating efficiency with things like heat pumps and so forth. So the state has a real significant role to play there. And any means we can use to generate power locally or reduce reliance on fossil fuels is a good investment. And we should be thinking about that at the state level.
Thank you. Beyond the cost of living, we're facing a lot of changes in our community, not least of which is access to health care. For those of us who have families that are growing, you may have heard that Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, for example, recently lost its maternity OBGYN wing and will no longer be delivering children except on an emergency basis. What is it we should be doing to help keep healthcare resources in our community as we go forwards over the next couple years? And we'll start with John T.
For the last 12 years, I've sat on Board of Trustees at Mount Scottney Hospital, and now the last couple of years, Valley Regional Hospital. And I can tell you the policy climate in both states is quite different. But I hear on the one hand that, and it's true to a large degree, that some of the major cost drivers for things like education and just cost of living or healthcare, and the finger gets pointed at the healthcare system here in Vermont or elsewhere. But at the same time, I know that our rural hospitals are just on the borderline of solvency, many of them, and so it's an issue that's bigger, at least for rural hospitals. I can't speak to what's going on at UVM Medical Center, that it's a problem that's largely bigger than Vermont. I think one area, federal policy plays a huge role in this, and the cost shifts for Medicaid that we're going to see are going to further impact their ability to deliver health care here, and then increase costs because fewer people will have insurance, more will be going to emergency rooms for care, and costs get shifted onto those that do have insurance. I think that we need to think regionally, if we can, as a state, to have so that we can take advantage of bigger pools for insurance and maybe drive costs down. We need to continue to work on cost reductions. I would say that one of the roles of the Green Mountain Care Board is to reduce overall administrative costs. What I'm seeing, though, as a trustee of the hospital, is that the increased reporting and regulatory is actually adding to administrative burden. So I think we need to make sure that the Green Mountain Care Board is really having the impact that it should be having. And in the end, I think moving towards a primary care model that's accessible to all people is going to be key, so that we can really focus on preventative care, which pays off in the long run and makes care more accessible to to all Vermonters, but really all people in the country, because again, Vermont's pool is just so small. It's very difficult for us to manage costs with the pool that we have.
All right, thank you. Dylan?
Great. My dad was a Harvard firefighter for 20 years, and then he drove an ambulance and helped people in their sort of most emergency situations. And I remember always hearing from him that, you know, we could have avoided an ambulance trip had someone gotten help they needed before. We could have gone without a hospital visit. And of course, these events are traumatic for the people involved, but they're also very expensive. They're very expensive on the system, and the costs get shared around. This country is the only country, like developed country, that doesn't guarantee health care to its people. And I think if we're gonna make sure that people have the care they need, you know, not when it's an emergency, but before that, when they actually need help, we can take care of people, we can prevent emergencies, we can get people the primary care they need to make sure they're healthy. The cost of our system, our taxes subsequently will drop drastically. I mean, we've got to take care of people throughout their lives, or we're going to be paying for it in the end. People are an investment. They're an investment in our communities, and we should be taking care of them. The healthcare system in this country it amazes me how resilient it is for something that works for almost no one. So we need really significant change in the healthcare system, and it's going to start with taking care of people, you know, before emergencies come.
John?
Well, I don't want to be too repetitive, but John, you covered a lot of the points that need to be made. One thing that we have a real problem with is availability of healthcare providers. And one example that comes to mind is a bill that I actually didn't support that would allow optometrists to perform surgical procedures that previously only ophthalmologists, who are medical doctors, would be permitted to do. And one of the arguments used on the House floor for that bill is that if you're living in rural Vermont, there is no ophthalmologist, or you may not be able to get an appointment. So where are we going to get the physicians we need? Go to the hospital. How often do you get to see a physician? You're seeing a physician assistant or a nurse. So we need these healthcare providers to come here. We also have to deal with the fact that healthcare, as you pointed out, our system, we have one of the worst for a developed nation. It's embarrassing what our healthcare system looks like. It's just absurd. And we have people, as John said, you're going to the emergency room to get your primary care, as opposed to the much more affordable route of preventative medicine. Because if you are taking care of yourself better, you know what you're doing, you're not going to end up getting sick, perhaps. Won't have to go to the emergency room, and won't be a burden on the people who are paying the health insurance, because often these medical emergency room visits are borne by other people who have insurance. And we have to come to terms with how we can make our healthcare insurance more affordable so all Vermonters have insurance. And we seem to be, as a nation and as a state, to be moving in the wrong direction. How to attract healthcare providers to the state, that's a real challenge, but I'm hoping that we can come up with some creative answers for that. I always think, like, why wouldn't they want to come here? We have some great hospitals, we've got great people, and we have a wonderful state to live in. But we have the shortage.
Can I add?
Yeah, you had a few seconds left.
Okay. You know, again, I think a lot of this is related. I mean, if we often attract people to come here, but then they find that they can't afford to live here, and then they don't move here.
Or they can't get a house.
Or they can't get a house. That's one of the key drivers of cost. I've been working at Dartmouth College, and I have access to technically free primary care. Somebody's paying for it, but I'm not, right? So I know that people get tested for things regularly, like diabetes or hypertension and so forth, and have a program of treatment before it becomes, you know, something that requires, you know, type 1 or type 2. It advances from pre-diabetes and so forth. And that's just one example. the colleges recognize that it saves a lot of money in its insurance pool by doing that. So if Dartmouth can do it and other employers can do it, I would like to see the state find a similar way to do that. And so not only does it save money, but it makes for a healthy population.
If I could add one more point as well.
Sure, briefly.
To John's point, we have doctors and nurses today who are turning down jobs at Dartmouth and our other hospitals because they can't find a place to live.
All right, so I'm going to open up to the audience after this next set of questions. Last big topic for just general discussion this evening. Recently, in the last few years, we've seen a lot of change in Vermont's school structures, from consolidation to discussions around school choice. Where do you think Vermont's education system needs to be going over the next 5 to 10 years? And I think we'll start with John Bartholomew this time.
Well, that's a big one. Talking to my constituents in all 3 towns, I'm not hearing from anybody that they feel like our education system, the services, the education being provided to our children is a problem. That's not where our problem lies. It has to do with the costs and the property tax. So why the state is so focused on big change, particularly change where you don't understand what the outcome is actually going to be. Last time we went through a round of consolidation, as near as I can tell, it saved no money and it improved no outcomes. We've got great schools in our district and great options for our children, and they're receiving, I believe, a very good education and are able to pursue things that perhaps other parts of the state. As a representative, I'm supposed to be looking across the entire state, but I have to admit I do focus on the needs of our own children in this district, and I'm not saying that we have huge problems. So one of the things that I really appreciated the governor this time around was really pushing for forced consolidation, as did the education chair. And that's not what the board that was doing the studies about how to change, that's not what was recommended, and that is not what ultimately came out of the committee or the bill that passed. So forced consolidation is just going to make people unhappy. It's not going to improve our outcome, and I don't believe we'll save any money. So we've talked already about the cost property tax, and that's where I think we need to focus to meet the needs of the folks the students in our district.
Thank you. John Tansey.
I didn't support the governor's plan to consolidate into 5 governance districts. I've looked at case studies of other states that have done that, Massachusetts, Maine, Texas, and I think there's some others. And as John mentioned, and in our own experience in Vermont, it hasn't reduced costs over the long term. We typically don't see an improvement in learning outcomes based on forced consolidation of rural schools. It can place marginalized kids at greater risk because they're having to get on buses and go further away from home, and when many struggle just to get to school on a regular basis. And it can also be destabilizing for communities that so much of the social fabric functions around schools. That said, we do have to address the issue of rising costs in education. I looked, and about 30+% of the cost of delivering pre-K through 12 education comes out of property taxes. 30-something%. That means there's a lot more money going into that system in addition to property taxes, yet we're not seeing results that we want to see. So we're making huge investments. It's costing a lot, and so we definitely have to bend the cost curve because of affordability. But all of this talk about consolidation and financing, we're dropping the ball on outcomes. I'm not saying that the teachers are, because they're committed to making sure that we make progress, but we need to really have a strong plan in place and be focused on getting the outcomes, particularly when it comes to reading, because so much else comes from being able to read. This is going to continue to be an important topic. They're talking about a foundation formula, which in some ways can simplify the education funding, make it a little bit more transparent. But it really depends on the details too. And the question is, what's the state's commitment to funding that over time? And will there be opportunities for wealthier districts to invest much more than districts with less resources? And if that's the case, and if the state doesn't maintain its funding, we could be back into a situation where we were pre-Act 60 when I was on the school board in my 20s here, and saw budget after budget being failed here in Windsor because we just didn't have the resources to support a school. So big question, and we have a lot of work to do there.
Thank you. Dylan?
Yeah, we talk a lot about consolidation. That's kind of the headlining policy from this year, and I think it's just ridiculous. We've done it before and it hasn't saved money. I don't think it'll save money again, and I don't think it'll be good for our kids. I went to Harlan Elementary School. I know I got a great education there, and it's fueled me in everything I've done in my life. And to hear from Montpelier in our party and from the governor that small isn't going to cut it anymore, I personally find it insulting. But the other piece of this is the foundation formula that was passed this year. And I think that's going to have really, really harsh consequences on our district that will start next year. Our schools here are going to have to cut resources dramatically to get under the formula level and to not face a double taxation penalty. And we're talking about resources that are really needed in our districts. I think the main reason that education costs so much is because of the healthcare piece. But I also don't want to act like everything is peachy in our schools either, because our kids are performing much lower in reading and math proficiency. I know we have the gold standard teachers because I had them in school, and I've been a substitute teacher since then in the area, and I know our schools are doing everything they can. They're being asked to do so much. They're providing mental health resources in school, special education on the rise. They're being asked to do more than ever before, and we haven't sort of created our education system of tomorrow that takes that into consideration. But we need to, and we need to for our kids' sake. We need to get back on track with learning and outcomes, and that predates COVID. And we need to make sure our teachers have their health care. It's good health care and it's affordable, and that'll help us bend the cost curve while focusing on the outcomes of our students, which always gets left out in Montpelier. Our students have to come first.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, what I was going to do was open up to questions, so why don't we go ahead and give everyone a few seconds to respond, and then we'll open to the audience. All right. So, John B., do you want to go first, and then we'll let you respond?
And I was just going to add to this last bit and you touched on this, is we're asking our schools to do more and more, and they don't have the resources to do it. Years ago, there was no pre-K. That's a very important part of education, but it comes at a cost. We have more and more problems with special education that's really expensive, and that's one of the things that the bill we did pass this year should really help with, is trying to be able to share those resources among different school districts. Mental health is a huge issue, particularly after COVID. Schools didn't used to be tasked with that. Behavioral issues are going on and on. Universal school meals. So we're asking schools to do more and more all the time, and they just don't have the resources. They're not given the resources.
I think it's kind of along the same vein as John and Dylan, but we hear healthcare is the driver, but the other things are drivers too. Schools are funding pre-K education. They're funding an expanded set of special services, including mental health. Teachers are having to deal with things like what to do with electronic devices. The kids are not reading as much as they used to at home. Parents are not reading to them. So it's really a big problem across a number of things, and our schools are increasingly asked to solve kind of societal problems. So I would say also that we also need to push back on parenting too. And I realize that people are stressed, they're working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet, but it's not only the school's responsibility to educate our children, it's parents and the community, and I think that has to be part of the conversation also.
Okay. All right, so I do have a few more topics if we don't have very many questions, but I wanted to make sure we left plenty of time tonight for the constituents. So if people want to go ahead and raise their hands, if you have a question, I'll come around. If those of us who are older remember Maury Povich and Phil Donahue, will do it that way. So I see the first hand back over here. I'll just ask folks to share their name and then go ahead with the question.
All right. Thank you, sir.
There you go.
Hi, Martin Dole. I've lived in Heartland for the past 36 years. My wife and I raised 2 boys. The state of Vermont's state budget in 2019 was $5.8 billion for 624,000 Vermonters. The budget that was just passed is $9.4 billion, with only a 20,000 increase in Vermonters. That's over a 40% increase in 6 years. I don't believe anybody's salary has gone up by 40% in the last 6 years. My last son graduated Hartland Hartford High School in 2016. The Heartland school budget was $8,200,000. The budget that just passed this year was $11.5 million. The state school budget increase is absolutely unsustainable for the taxpayers in this state. When you get your tax bill, 70% of it's your school budget, 30% is your town. Town of Heartland is 27% town, and the rest is for the school. The town of Heartland has the highest tax rate in the third highest tax rate in the state of Vermont. Last year we were 5th. We can't do a reappraisal until 2030, because the state of Vermont only allows a couple of companies to do these reappraisals. We put it on the board 2 years ago for an RFP to get it in 2030. So we have to continuously paying higher taxes because we can't get our CLA down, because we can't get a reappraisal done. The state keeps saying they're going to pay for these programs. That's out of our pockets. We do not have the population as the other states do to pay for all these programs. We need to figure a way to make it sustainable for both sides of the aisle. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I know everyone's got a lot of emotional and strong opinions, but I would like to ask people to focus on asking the candidates questions this evening. Yeah. No, I understand, but thank you. It's their night to answer this, so to respond. Yeah. So I think you want to go ahead and respond, John. So just ask for your response.
I question, Martin. When you say on both sides of the aisle, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about Montpelier has to figure a way to make this work so it's sustainable for everybody. Because if you take land use, so let's pick land use as an article, as a problem. The farmers in this state have a great. It's awesome for the farmers. When we have out-of-staters that are using land use, paying less in taxes than Vermonters for a lot of land.
Okay.
The taxpayers are paying for that. Montpelier doesn't want to fix these issues.
Okay. I don't know. I haven't been using this, have I?
Yeah, no, you're all set there.
I think I looked at the question. I've been hearing this as I've been out knocking on doors, that people saying that, residents are paying less in tax, or more in taxes than non-residents. And I looked at this across the state, and actually in most instances that's not the case. There are a number of towns where the non-residents are paying less than the residents, and those, I think, primarily are because of local decisions. And it's how the formula is structured, and particularly those towns that are spending above, putting themselves in like the excess spending threshold, getting the penalty. Those are towns, and that's going to accelerate as the state ratchets down pressure on that. I think in the town of Heartland, I was on a regional school committee back in the late 90s, 80s. Then I served on the Act 46 committee also that looked at the 4 towns in our supervisory union, the question of could we save money by regionalizing and perhaps have better outcomes. Back in the late 80s and 90s, Heartland was not interested in being part of that conversation. We did have conversations with Act 46. Heartland and Wethersfield decided to go a different direction. Windsor and West Windsor decided to merge. The challenge for Heartland is that because of the pressure on the formula is that each year you have to make the difficult decision, do you continue to pay whatever the tuition rates to neighboring schools, or do you make cuts and fund your elementary at the level you want, pay those tuition bills, and raise taxes, or do you make cuts to the elementary school because that's the only place you have to go to do it, really? And that's become an increasingly difficult decision, but it is a local decision, and I think it should be a local decision. But there is going to be another opportunity to step back and say, as for communities, or maybe even bigger, would it make sense to think 5, 10, 20 years down the road, and is a different way of delivering education in our communities? Could it be more affordable? Could it be produce better outcomes because we'll have more control over the delivery of the education system? Or do we want to continue with the present course and have these challenges and hope that the state will somehow rescue local communities with an infusion of money to the education system, which I think is probably not likely in the near future. And the only other way would be some other restructuring, hopefully short of forced consolidations, because I don't think that's the right direction.
Okay, thank you. And so I want to give Dylan and John B. a chance to respond.
Yeah, I think school boards serve, a very important role in our communities, and I would be interested to see how they go about their processes after the foundation formula kicks in, because there's not going to be much room for flexibility in the budgets after that sort of cap gets set. And I'll be curious what stays, what goes, how that decision is made, and if it impacts the quality of the education for our kids. I think it's sort of unfortunate that we're taking that local decision making away. There's more structural ways to reduce costs. And I think you've touched on some of them, Martin, about, there are these places across the state in every town where people with a lot of means can qualify for tax breaks because of how they're using their land. And I don't think that's an effective way to make our budget. And I think our primary homeowners have to come first in our communities, and our kids have to come first. And I'm nervous about this foundation formula and what that'll do for our kids. There's better ways to do this.
Okay. And John B.
Well, we already touched on many of the reasons for the increase in education costs. So I don't think we need to go back there. One of the issues that, another one that Martin, you brought up was the current use. And there are 150 people in the House and 30 in the Senate, so that's 180 people, and I think we probably have 250 different opinions about how to fix it. So it's a real challenge. These discussions happen all the time, and how to make it more equitable. So it's just, there are just so many different ways to look at it, how current use helps the state, the character of the state versus keeping people still in farming. And then the out-of-state people coming in and having a huge tax break, but they're protecting the land. So all these debates happen almost continuously at the State House. Some of the other points you made, what was the other one? He went somewhere else. Keep in mind though also that the budget numbers that are presented when we pass the budget, a lot of that includes federal funding. And when using transportation as an example, many of our transportation projects, sometimes they're up to 90% federally funded. The percentage varies depending on the project, but if we don't, as a state, come up with that 10%, then we're leaving the 90% of that funding on the table, which doesn't make any sense. So that drives up our budget. But a lot of the federal funding, and particularly during the COVID years, we had a massive influx of federal funding, which has now gone away. So some of those numbers reflect that.
Okay, thank you. All right. There you go.
Hi, Jenny Freeman. I live in Windsor, and I love to talk to people about the prison property, and I find that there are, as John B. put it, there are like 200 opinions for every 100 residents of Windsor about the prison property, and I have my own opinions, and I'm curious about yours. I think that the prison property represents an opportunity to create more housing and increase the grand list. Maybe the best opportunity for Windsor. But yet everybody has a different opinion, and they seem to block each other out and create a huge traffic jam. So I'm wondering if you have ideas about what to do with the prison property and also how to break the log jam.
Thank you. All right, do you want to go first, Dylan?
Yeah. I think it does present a really great opportunity, and I think it just has to be used for housing. It's the most pressing issue that we have here, is not having housing for really anyone in the ladder of life. I'm looking for an apartment. My parents are looking to downsize. My grandparents have looked to downsize, and it's just hard to do. There aren't a lot of options. So the more options, the better. We should use it for housing, and I wouldn't want to speak over any dissenting opinions in that conversation, but I just feel passionately that it should be used for housing because it's so urgent of a need, and because it would be a great space.
Thank you. John B.?
One of the challenges I think those of you from Windsor recognize is that the land mass of the town is actually half of what many other towns would be. So having so much land tied up in state-owned property can really impact the ability to collect property tax. That being said, the wildlife management area that is there now is a tremendous resource for the state, and I think could be a an economic driver for the town, not just Windsor, but also West Windsor and Heartland. Donna Swaney and I were serving when we got something like 900 acres was there, part of the prison property, and 800 some is now part of the wildlife management area, which is a tremendous resource. So we're left with this part that's left in the fenced area and some 100 acres surrounding, and what to do with that. One of the things I'm hoping for is that Audubon, and there's some other organizations that are really adamant, including Fish and Wildlife, to expand the wildlife management area to bring in in closer to the fence line. One of the real challenges with developing the property is that we have heard so many incredibly great ideas. One that I particularly like is creating senior housing there. Anything we do there, we want to really look at what impact it would have on the wildlife management area, because we don't want that area adversely impacted. But one of the problems we keep running into is all these great ideas come forward, but no one comes forward with a business plan. So without any concrete, this is our plan, here's the money, we're ready to go, the state can't really consider what to do. And then there's always I'm not sure what they talk about in the Institutions and Corrections Committee, but it seems like that committee, which is overseeing a lot of what happens at that property, they really look at it as a resource, like, okay, here's an opportunity for a mental health facility or a correctional facility, a transitional facility. And as near as I can tell, the citizens of Windsor don't want any of those. So we're kind of stuck. We've got this property, there's all this stuff in it, the buildings that need to be taken down, that's a liability to anyone coming in, and no viable plans to do anything else with it. So it just sits there year after year, and it's costing the state a couple $100,000 a year just to mothball this thing.
Great. John T.
Yeah, actually, John, Windsor has about a third of the land that most community has, and it's because Windsor and West Windsor split a long time ago. And 1/3 of what's remaining as Windsor is owned by the state. So it leaves us with about 8,000 acres when most communities have 24,000. And of that 8,000, we have, flood zone. We have a very dense development pattern that was fueled by industry and requires a lot of infrastructure. So it's kind of like a city effect. We have a little bit of land and a lot of need for services just because of the settlement pattern. So understanding that we're so land poor, it's important that we get some economic benefit from that property. So the question is what? And I think as Dylan suggested, and I've heard other people talk about, housing seems, in a way that's done, that's, I think, responsibly for that area. Looking at the area inside the current fence where the prison was locating may be the best use. And now, of course, there's a lot of different opinions and about impacts and so forth, but I think that those can be addressed. And, it was an operating prison for a long time with trucks and logging trucks and, visitors and so forth. So, I think those needs can be accommodated. But I also think that, I've been around long enough that we've done this dance with the state a few times. And as ideas progress, it gets to the point, whether it's the institution committee or somebody else, there's a group in Montpelier that tends to say, well, that's a pretty valuable piece of property, and we think the state should hold on to it. And not really giving any consideration for the importance of that in generating revenue of some sort for an income poor town like, property poor town like Windsor. Vermont is also not always regularly fully funded the payment in lieu of taxes programs, and the last I knew, I think there was a surplus in that fund, and the state was trying to figure out what to do with it. Well, I have a good answer for that. Send it to the towns that you should be paying it to. The key is we do need to get some economic benefit of that. I think the wildlife management area is a great thing, and we can maybe realize more benefit out of that through outdoor activities that don't compromise the environmental aspects. But it is an important thing, and I certainly would work hard in the legislature to make sure that we see some benefit from that property.
Right. All right. Questions? There you go.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Steve Bissett. I was born and raised northern Vermont, raised my kids in southern Vermont, and my current wife and I moved here in 2006. I've got a pragmatic question, which I will preface by saying I feel like there's nothing we can do about the nature of for-profit healthcare in America right now. It's too big. The state can't tackle it. The state tried. The insurance companies pumped a lot of money in and crushed it. And I feel like with the questions that have been raised and the statements you've made, not only are we paying for our own health insurance, but through our property tax, more and more of our funds just go to the insurance companies. That's the system they've set up. Not being able to buck that leads me to the pragmatic question, if at the state level something could be done about the tax system where what we have to pay out of pocket, income that we're taxed on, but that can't go into our household or our lives because it goes into our health insurance and the cost of health care. Is there a way to skim that off the top of our income that we're taxed for? That seemed to me a possibly pragmatic way of beginning to address the problem. There's so many health costs, we just lost Rite Aid. So people in town that were using taxi cab to get to Rite Aid now have to go to West Lebanon. So all our business has gone to New Hampshire or Springfield, Vermont. All this is being paid out of the pocket of the individual taxpayer, but we don't get any relief at any point. And if with my state income taxes, I could deduct off of my income all the healthcare costs before I'm paying tax on the actual income my household gets to use, that would make a big difference in being able to stay here.
Okay. So I do want to remind folks, this is like Jeopardy. We do want these in the form of a question. So
Well,
I'll
my
ask you.
question is that pragmatic at the state level?
Yeah,
Is that
so-
something the state could actually do?
Yeah.
That's the question.
What can be done on the individual level to help manage healthcare expenses, such as tax deductions or things like that, right? Oh, is that a fair framing?
That's the question.
Okay, great. So in that case, we'll start with John T. Oh, you got, yep. There you go.
It's a great question. There's a lot of pressure on the state budget already, and there's going to be more as federal cutbacks get pushed on the states. So I think any investments we can make that have a payoff, like if preventative, then reduces costs overall, is a good investment. The question is, with all of the pressure that's on the state budget currently and what we're seeing coming, if we're going to offer a tax break to, basically a pre-tax kind of recognition of costs that are going to medical care, the state is going to have to make that up someplace else. So maybe it's the right investment, but then the next question is, what goes? What else goes? And I think that's going to be a key question for the state in the coming years, and it should be one we ask every year. I have a sense, I'm not an expert on the state budget, that the state is overextended. They were trying to do too much for too many. It's all good stuff. But, I think we really need to step back and focus on what are the core responsibilities of the state, providing good roads, bridges, unemployment system, transportation services, and then look at where we have to make important investments that pay off over the long term, like in healthcare or mental health or daycare. So it makes sense at one level, but the question is, how does that fit in the set of priorities that are going to be increasingly squeezed as time goes on? And certainly if it's something we can do, we should look at it, especially if it has a payoff over the long term.
Okay. Dylan.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the creative thinking on these ideas. We have to be creative with all these topics, and I can appreciate, wanting to put money back in people's pockets. But I want to sort of push back on the idea that we can't make important, significant change in this state. We're the first state to ban slavery, the first state to legalize civil unions. This state is a leader in this country, and we need legislators who are going to push forward to continue to make sure it's a leader in this country. And I think we need to look at all opportunities, whether it's, we may not be able to support a single-payer system on our own, but we should look at it, a preventative care system on our own, we should look at it. But if we can't, we should be going to our neighbors and asking if they want to join too, because it's going to help their people, their providers, their insurers, everyone. I think we have to dream a little bigger right now about what's possible and what we're going to ask of our state and of our nation. And that's hard to do with the state of politics in our nation right now. But it's honestly an opportunity, I think, to ask more.
Okay. And John B.
One thing that really strikes me is the three of us seem to share the same opinion about a lot of things, which is, I guess, a good thing. I have to agree with Dylan that we shouldn't give up in fixing the healthcare system. There's got to be a way to do it. We have to really focus on that. And as we've said before, Vermont is too small to do it on our own. New England would be a powerful force if we could somehow join forces with the neighboring states on healthcare and trying to come up with a system that works across the whole region. We're not very good at that. One example that comes to mind that's totally unrelated to healthcare is reintroduction of catamounts. We talked about this in the Environment Committee. Vermont's not big enough to do that on our own. We don't have enough large forest tracts to do it. So we have to get this regional stuff going. In terms of coming up with a tax break for healthcare, it would be really helpful for Vermonters, but it would create a revenue problem where how do we make up that revenue? And the unfortunate reality is when the money, they do the budget in the finance committees and the appropriations committee, there is very little discretionary funding. There's not a lot of extra money. Each committee is asked, what, if you could fund it, what would you put forward? And the committees come up with this whole list, and it's usually 20 times more good ideas about to spend money on that would really help Vermont and help Vermonters than we have available funds. So there's not a lot of discretionary funding out there. So if we were to come up with yet another tax break for Vermonters, as much as it would help them, how are we going to make up that revenue? So that would be the real challenge to address what you were talking about.
I would just say to that, though, if we can see that by making that investment, it's going to save money through reduced usage of the healthcare system over time, then that should be investment we look closely at.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, back here. There you go.
Hi, my name is Allison Marcioni. I'm a resident of Heartland. We've talked a lot about the pressing need for more housing in our communities tonight, and there's also been some allusions to the regulations that can hold up that kind of housing. A lot of those regulations are environmental regulations. So I would like it if each of you could talk about the intersection between housing development and environmental protection and what your values are in that area.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, and I think John B. will start this time.
There's a lot in that question. One of the things that we really are trying to focus on in the legislature is smart development rather than unrestrained growth. So development of village centers helps us in many ways. So trying to get development in a place like Windsor where you've already got a town, as opposed to Heartland where we're just spread out all across the town. And it makes sense from so many perspectives, including affordability. Transportation is another huge one. When people are spread out, you can't come up with a transportation system. But in terms of housing, another issue we have here, and I touched on this before, is we may not really have as an acute housing shortage as we think. What we have is the housing is not being shared appropriately. It's all getting bought up by people out of state, starting Airbnbs, whereas as opposed to if we had people creating apartments and or more shared housing, that kind of stuff. We just haven't explored all of the option for looking at the inventory that's already there, because as you know, to build new housing is extremely expensive, and if you can afford the land, you can't afford to build the house on it. It's just crazy what construction materials cost now. And if the state's going to try to subsidize that, where do we get the funding? How many people can we, how many people's needs can we meet? So it's a very convoluted question you asked.
Okay. John T.
Just off the top of my head, I mean, I've actually been thinking about this, and I have some talking points that I'll refer to. But you know, again, just thinking based on this conversation and something I said earlier. I mean, could we have a current use program for housing? You know, like that we can get a housing stock that can be protected and have it advantageous in terms of turning it over to the next worker or working class housing. Would there be opportunities to identify, retain, and maybe even expand a stock of housing that could be protected from private equity purchases or Airbnbs and those types of things? I don't know, but maybe we can look at that. As I thought about this question, it ties to the whole land use discussion that's happening. My thoughts are this: that good policy must protect the environment. But it must make property, it must remain affordable. But these policies must also be shaped by the people it affects, right? We've got to have very participatory process. Well-intentioned conservation rules without proper balance can slow housing development, raise cost of living, and push residents to leave. We don't want that to happen, okay? We don't want to compromise the environment. We've got to have the right balance. So there's kind of an equation, environment plus affordability plus local voice equals a policy that will work for Vermont. And we have to make sure that as we have these conversations, there's ample opportunity for civic involvement. I think the conversations around Act 181 have perhaps been well-intentioned, but took a lot of people by surprise and been moving so quickly that there's a lot of pushback and a real need for further public participation and input.
Okay, thank you. And Dylan?
Yeah, I'm with John on this one. There's a balance that has to be struck, and I think it's not been struck in a way that helps rural Vermont and places in our district prosper. I'm an outdoorsman. I love to hike. I love to kayak. I love the environment. We need to make sure our kids can live here, and I think that's my priority on issues like this. Property ownership, I think, is an absolute, backbone of the prosperity from the founding of this country, and it's something that has to be honored in these conversations and can't be sort of walked on. Act 250, I think, needs review because we're actually limiting some of the things that we say we want through regulations where small farms in town can't host events because they need an Act 250 permit, or a local farm restaurant can't open because they need a permit. And it ends up creating the situation where we're in now, where if you have means and you can go to court, you can spend all your time learning the intricacies of Act 181, Act 250, and all the land use laws, you can build what you want. But if you are working and you don't have that time or that background, you're harshly restricted, and I think too harshly. And so I'm on the side of a more fair balance between environmental issues and housing and prosperity, and I think they work in tandem. People live a greener life when they are solid, comfortable, they have their basic needs met, and we aren't meeting them yet, and we need to.
Okay, thank you. Any last questions? Oh, Yatsen, there we go.
So, one of the reasons that I believe Heartland's property taxes to be so high is because, I mean, quite frankly, and I know this is a touchy subject, but school choice, and the fact that we
Can we have you stand up? Yeah.
we can, when you're going to Hartford, Heartland, you can choose to go to Hanover or Sharon Academy or an independent school. If it's going to lower the costs to only send to public schools, would you support removing that option?
Thank you. All right, I think John T.
I said before, I think decisions about choice or not have to be made by the community. I also think that the state funding situation is such that those decisions are more difficult as time goes on because it's forcing the question, do you pay more and raise taxes? That's one approach. Or do you pay more per tuition because you don't control it and then make cuts at the elementary level, which nobody wants to do? Those are the choices, and they're getting more difficult as time goes on. There is another choice, and this will be back on the table this year. Would it make sense to have a regional school possibility that could reduce costs, could give communities control over the outcomes in terms of the curriculum and so forth? But that's going to be a community decision. I don't think the state should come in and say, you have to do this. But those are the choices, and they're very difficult ones, and they're going to be difficult for Heartland and Wethersfield, our neighboring towns in the supervisory union, because Windsor, and West Windsor share a high school at this point, so it's really not a decision we have to make. We would certainly be open, I think, to having conversations around would it make sense to have a bigger regional school concept and maybe even locating it in one of the other towns, as long as we could repurpose the buildings we have. But again, it really should be and needs to be a local decision.
Okay. Dylan?
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a local decision. Towns and families can participate in school board processes, and they know what's best for their kids. I do sort of, I've heard from people knocking on doors in all three towns about this issue, and it's probably the most divisive issue for our district. And I went to Heartland, and I had classmates who went to all different schools, public, private, Vermont, New Hampshire, elsewhere. And they've had experiences that worked great for them, regardless of where they went. That being said, it would be my preference that Vermont tax dollars are used to pay Vermont teachers and educate students in Vermont.
Okay. All right, John B.
One of the, speaking specifically for Heartland, one of the challenges we've had, and my district mate and I have been fighting for years trying to fix this, is this excess spending threshold where Heartland cannot control what we're being charged by intuition from the receiving schools. And so the only way to make up that difference is either to pay a penalty or for Heartland Elementary School to suffer, which is not a good alternative. We've been trying to fix that, and that's one of the problems we have in Montpelier is so many of our representatives are from Chittenden County. That's where our population is, so they've got a much bigger voice. But we've been fighting that battle for a long time. I've heard some really intriguing ideas of a regional high school, where to put it, and exactly how much it would cost. We could create an incredible school, but that would also mean things like Windsor High School would close. Is that something we want to do? Local decision. Might include Hartford High School and Heartland, and the whole area could all be going to a great regional high school. But that doesn't exist, and how to make that work, who knows if it's a possibility. In terms of choice, though, we've already made some progress in terms of we're not sending tuition dollars to private schools in Spain or France or wherever and anywhere. So we've already made that progress. But in terms of Heartland and school choice, it comes at a cost. And if Heartland residents, many people move to Heartland because of school choice and because they work somewhere in White River, they work up in Hanover, they can send their kids where it's most convenient for them, but that comes at a cost. Should we limit that? And I would want to hear what the school board thinks and what the Heartland residents think, but my personal opinion is we probably are at a point now where we're going to have some designated high schools. I don't know how many, 3, 4, 5, what number is the right amount, but they would have to be public schools and designated. But that would be one option that makes sense to me. Whether my constituents agree with me remains to be seen.
Can I just say that, you mentioned that a lot of people reside in Heartland and choice towns because they want to have choice, which is true. I think, though, if you keep getting in a situation where you have to raise taxes to fully support your elementary school and preserve tuition options, you may attract people that like that, but you may also lose people, families with children that can't afford it. So, and if you have fewer children in school, the education formula is based on cost per student, so that could actually continue to fuel the pressure, the upward pressure on the school tax rate. So, again, it's a Heartland conversation, but it's complex interactions at play there.
I want to make sure I give you a chance, Dylan. Anything else before moving to closing statements on school choice? All righty, thank you. All right, so I'd like to give each of you about a minute or two to go ahead and close this evening. And we started with John T., so we'll come down the other way from John B. to close this evening.
Closing statements. Well, obviously, I've been there a while. Experience is really important in Montpelier. It's a very complex organization, and it takes quite a while to figure out what is going on and to become effective. I'm on the leadership team. I've had a lot of experience in the legislature, and I think that that would be really valuable to our district to continue with that continuity. That being said, I've got to say that I'm really pleased that we as a district have three, I believe, excellent candidates to choose from. So congratulations on the two of you for really having some great thoughts about the future of our district. What else to say? I don't really know. I would really appreciate your vote. I do a good job. I've been there a while. I've been a public servant all my life, all my professional life, and like to go back.
Thank you. Dylan?
Yeah, I appreciate everyone being here tonight, and you guys as well, and for the hosts and the live stream. I think this is the start of something special where the community can come together and sort of hash out these ideas and send our policymakers to Montpelier with direction. I think if you're happy with how politics have gone in our nation and in our state and the progress that's been made on the issues we're facing today, then I'm probably not your candidate because I see that we need significant change and we need strong voices that will push it forward. And I'm ready to be that person. I think my experience is qualifying and my ability to learn, listen, and lead is what makes me stand out. I'm a quick study, I'm a good listener, but I'm worried about the future of our state, and I think we need to change course, and I think I'm the change candidate. I was talking with a resident here, and they looked at me and said, Dylan, you are of the generation that will make or break Vermont with your decision to stay here or to leave. And I don't take that lightly. I'm not one for dramatics, but I think we really are at a crossroads point where we need to keep our people here, our young people especially, 60% of whom say they're likely to leave in the next 5 years. If half do, we're facing a pretty extreme fiscal crisis. And so I think my youth and my perspective is a huge advantage for me going into the State House, and I look forward to putting it to use for you. So thank you.
Thank you. And John T.
Well, I'd like to say that appreciate being here with these two gentlemen, and just on your point, I think it's great to see younger people involved in the political process. So I think that's super, Dylan, that you're in this race. I did return here 26 years ago from a brief time away, working overseas, for the very purpose of bolstering my community and through public service, and I've made a lifetime of doing that, and I'm still committed to doing that. I gave a lot of thought to my opening and then my closing comments, so I'm gonna draw from what I've written here. Tonight our discussion focused on some of the priorities that will guide my work if I'm elected to the legislature. Affordability. We need to keep healthcare, education, and everyday costs within reach of families. Opportunity. Everyone should have access to adequate housing, good education, and jobs, and can get ahead by working hard. It's just not possible right now for most people. Sustainability. We need to protect our environment for future generations. That's very special about Vermont. We need to be committed to that. Land use. We need sensible and effective land use policies that balance environmental protection, affordability, and local voice, and all achieved through genuine civic engagement. People have to be fully participants in the process. And another part of my campaign is decency. It's important that we treat each other with honesty and respect. We need to push the bar back up again. It's been lowered nationally, even around here, and things like honesty, integrity, and ethics and kindness are not old-fashioned, and we need to strive to set that example. I want to thank the Windsor Town Democratic Committee for hosting this forum, the audience here tonight, everyone watching or listening online, and Windsor On Air for filming this. A longtime Vermont family with children in college and high school recently told me they are planning to leave the state as soon as their youngest finishes high school. Their advice to their children is simple. Don't count on Vermont. You'll never be able to afford a home or to live here, no matter how hard you work or how good a job you get. I also heard from an elderly resident who has lived in the same house for decades. She now relies on her son's support to keep the house, and she cannot imagine where she could go if she had to move. There's simply no affordable option that meets her needs. This is not the Vermont I grew up in. A place that gave me opportunities for a good life, a solid education, a decent job, a home for my family, and time to give back for my community. Vermont is a truly amazing place, but we can and we must do better. That is why I'm running for office. Together we can help our towns and the state move forward. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. That is our forum. Please come out on Election Day.